keeping kosher. Before anything else today, I would love to know, what did you have for dinner last night, Sephora?
Sushi.
Sushi. What was in your
Before
sushi?
anything else today,
Huh? Oops.
I would love to know, what did you have for dinner last night?
Sorry. All right. What kind of sushi?
Salmon and avocado and cucumber.
Nice. Salmon, avocado, cucumber. I had that for lunch yesterday. Actually, I had tuna and avocado and cucumber. Sam's Club has good sushi. Right. Joyce, what did you have for dinner last night?
I had green beans, new potatoes cooked in them, and I also had a cucumber and a tomato, and that's it.
So veggies. I had fried rice with cheese. With cheese and veggies. All right. How about breakfast this morning, Sakura? What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I went to First Watch, that brunch place.
Love
And,
first.
like a chicken, egg, had a bunch of vegetables in it and
Right.
potatoes. Yeah.
Chicken, eggs, veggies.
It was like an omelet kind of thing.
Nice. Chicken, eggs, veggie bowl.
I had bacon.
You have bacon.
So
Perfect.
throw me out.
No, I'm really glad that you had bacon because this is good.
Bacon and toast.
Bacon and toast. All right. And I had oatmeal with milk and fruit. Okay. This is good. I'm glad we covered breakfast this morning because that widens our scale today. Before we jump in further, are there, and I think we spoke about this yesterday a little bit, Joyce. Are there food choices that you make that reflect your identity?
Oh, absolutely.
So what are some of those choices?
Well, nuts, you are what you eat, right? I just love fruits and vegetables, and I think that's, I don't know. I'm not really a meat person. I do eat it for some protein, but I don't even like it.
Right. So I'll give an example of a food choice that might reflect identity. So when I was vegetarian, back when I was vegetarian, I wouldn't consider having meat. Like for me, meat wasn't food. Right? I didn't just have a little bit of meat sometimes. It just didn't count as food to me. It wasn't something that I would ever think of ordering or of sampling from somebody else's plate. If somebody is allergic to wheat or if somebody is celiac, they wouldn't just try a bite of pizza just for the fun of it. Or if they had a peanut allergy, they wouldn't just have a bite of peanut, right? For them, peanuts aren't food, right? So for Sephora, do you have any sort of anything that you eat or don't eat that, affects your identity or reflects it?
Not right now. My diet's kind of been changing. So I relate to what you said. I was vegetarian for a while and so I didn't consider meat, but then I'm not a vegetarian right now. So I think my diet reflects kind of what my nutritional needs are right now. So yeah.
Right. And that's a part of our identity, what our nutritional needs are. Right? There are certain things I can't eat because of my nutritional needs as well. But for people who keep kosher, for a lot of people who keep kosher, it's a strong part of their identity. So bacon for me, bacon is not something I would consider eating. It's not even just I would have a little bit sometimes. It's just not a food for me. And when I go to a restaurant, or even when I don't go to a restaurant, I just wouldn't have a bite of shellfish. So for some people, they won't even consider going to a restaurant and eating food from a restaurant that doesn't use kosher dishes. So it's a part of their identity. It's not just a preference, but it's really who they are. Today, we're going to really look at the book rather than a PowerPoint, because I really like how the book expresses things. So Brad Artson says, gives this quote in It's a Mitzvah. If you're ever looking for a book, for an author that explains Judaism from a very compassionate place and also speaks from a place of process theology, Rabbi Artson is really wonderful. He writes, for over 3,000 years, Judaism has taught that how we eat and what we feed ourselves are sacred and communal matters, sanctifying us, educating us, nourishing our identity, and fortifying our mortality. We need that sustenance no less than our ancestors did. Our meals can feed our spirit too, through the same simple guidelines that have shaped Jewish eating and Jewish living since the beginning of our people. And not just in Judaism, right? In our society, in every society, what we have on our table sends us a message or sanctifies this time of year. So for example, on Thanksgiving, I wouldn't say, I don't know about most people, but quite a lot of people, when you've got a giant turkey on the table and sweet potatoes, etc. When you've got a giant turkey and sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie on the table, that tells us something about this time of year, right? When you've got watermelon and apple pie and there are fireworks going off, right? That tells us something about the time of year and makes it sacred. Okay? So food can be sacred, not just for Jewish reasons. What I'd love to do is to read each of these excerpts. We're going to ask the question, why keep kosher? And we're going to first read these 4 excerpts and see which ones make sense to us, which ones don't, and why else might we keep kosher. So Sephora, can you read the reverence for life?
The permission to eat meat is to be seen as a compromise, a divine concession to human weakness and human need. The Torah, as it were, says, I would prefer that you abstain from eating meat altogether, for to eat meat, the life of an animal must be taken, and that is a fearful act. But since you are imperfect, and since your desires cannot be stopped, they must at least be controlled. You may eat meat, but with a restriction that you have reverence for the life that you take.
Great. So according to Rabbi Dresner, why keep kosher?
Well, reverence for life.
Reverence for life. And for animal life, I think specifically for Rabbi Dresner, because what we'll learn in a few minutes is that kosher rules really have to do with animal life. Those are really where all the restrictions are things having ingredients with animal life. Joyce, will you read Jewish distinctiveness?
Is it Kashrut? Kashrut has served as a means of Jewish identification and distinctiveness. In that way, Kashrut has contributed to the perpetuation of the Jewish people and the retention of its way of life. The urgency of strengthening whatever factors in Jewish life make for survival is even greater now than in the past. The observance of Kashrut commends itself as a means to this end precisely because it can be practiced by any Jew. It is particularly effective in lending a Jewish atmosphere to the home, which in the diaspora is our last-ditch defense against the inroads of assimilation.
So diaspora means the world outside of Israel.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so why, according to according to Kaplan, to Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, why kashrut?
What does kashrut mean?
Keeping kosher.
It identifies them as being distinctive people.
Right.
Protect the Jewish community. Or
It's a means of protection, protect the Jewish community. Great. So Jewish identity. I'll read mindful consumption. The biblical call to holiness is reflected in Judaism's attempt to elevate the satisfaction of all basic urges for food, drink, sex, in which we differ not from any beast, onto a level worthy of man. Kashrut is a good example of how Judaism raises even the most mundane acts, the most routine activities, into a religious experience. What narrower minds look upon as a pikayun concern, as a basically trifling concern with trifling kitchen matters, is really an example of how Judaism elevates the mere physical satisfaction of one's appetite into a spiritual act by its emphasis on the ever-present God and our duty to serve God at all times. For Rabbi Donin, what's the reason to keep kosher?
He brings a divinity to your diet or actions.
Right. I have to think about God before every bite of food that I take, or before every meal I hope to cook. Right. That, oh, right. God commanded me, God told me that I can eat this or can't eat this. Brings God into the picture. And Sephora, can you read health? And this is, keep in mind, this is Maimonides writing a very, very long time ago.
To eat any of the various kinds of food that the Torah prohibits for us is unwholesome. The major reason why the Torah abhors pork is because it is very dirty and feeds on dirty things. This is as the rabbis teach. The mouth of a swine is like walking excrement. Yeah,
so that's pretty straightforward. It's health, right? We keep kosher, and it might go back to that mindfulness again, right? Mindfulness, but from this standpoint, from health, right? Every time I open my mouth, I think, wait, should I be eating this, right? Even if brownies are not dirty and eat up dirty things, every time I open my mouth to eat a brownie, I might think, wait, is this good for me? Do I really need a brownie at this point in time? And usually the answer is yes. But, it's a health-centered mindfulness. So whether for any of these reasons we just talked about reverence for animal life, identity, so Jewish distinctiveness, mindful consumption, meaning thinking about God with every bite we eat, and physical health, right? Thinking about our health with every bite we eat. For the two of you, why might, if you were to choose to keep kosher, why might you choose to keep kosher? What would be your reasoning?
To make more holy your practice of, eating or living.
So for you, it's that sanctity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what I would do. Say,
right, sanctity.
Mm-hmm.
I think for when I first started here, we would do lots of and I would do my teaching sessions. Dorothy Lobel, I noticed Dorothy Lobel would give the same answer to every question, right? Why? Because God said so. So for me, that's really the reason I do kashrut, right? Because God said so. And so I show my love for God by doing what God said. Right? And I think she meant it a little bit jokingly, but really it's a fact. It's a fact, yeah. Oh, before we do this, I'm not going to put this page down. Name 3 animals. Each of each of us gets to name 3 animals. So Sephora, first 3 animals you think of.
I don't know, like to eat, or just,
Any animals.
okay, there's a cat sitting by me, so a cat,
Okay.
chicken, bird. I guess chicken is a bird.
Chicken and what was the last one?
I said bird.
Oh, burger, so cow.
Oh, I said bird, but
Oh, okay, well, cow can be in there too. Bird, what kind of bird?
a bluebird.
Bluebird, nice. Okay. Cat, chicken, cow, and bluebird.
Dog,
Dog,
giraffe.
giraffe. Oh my gosh, giraffe is a hard one, actually. That's a challenge, but okay.
Okay. And a lion.
And a lion. Love that. I'm gonna add alligator, shrimp, and tuna. Okay. We are going to read this section of Deuteronomy, and keep in mind that these laws actually show up twice, or I think it's twice, might be 3 times, at least twice in Torah, because they show up in Leviticus as well. So it's not just in Deuteronomy, it's Leviticus as well. And we're gonna figure out what are the laws about keeping kosher that we can get from here. So we'll read to ourselves, and once you find a law about keeping kosher, just shout it out or speak it out.
Okay.
So animals that chew cud or have a split hoof, you may not. Mhm.
No, you may, so not you may not eat.
I know that's confusing.
Right.
It says you can, and then it says you can't.
Aha, so you may eat any animal that has a split hoof and that chews its cud. So those are the 2 requirements for land animals: split hoof or split hooves, chew cud. So read a little bit closer and tell me why this list is not okay to eat. The list, however, of those that chew the cud or have a split hoof.
Because they are impure, so.
But more than that, more concretely.
But they have to have both. They have to have the split hoof and chew the cud.
Right. So like a pig, for example, has the split hoof, but doesn't chew its cud. Right? So it must have split hooves and chew cud. That's for a land animal. So how about water animals?
You may eat any that has fins and scales.
Yeah, fins and scales. They must have fins and scales.
Oh,
All right, birds, we don't really know. So birds, what do we have in common for a lot of the birds that are in this list? That are in the lists of don't eat.
what was say again? What's in common with?
Common with these lists of birds that we're not supposed to eat. Not everything in there, but a lot of the things in there.
They're all really beautiful animals.
Oh, that's nice. That's a good midrash. They're beautiful. That's not doesn't tend to be how we describe them.
Well, they have feathers, right?
Yes, but there are also birds that don't, that have feathers that are okay to eat.
Okay, so is it because of what, something that those birds eat?
These are most of them, not all of them, but most of them are birds of prey.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Most of them are birds of prey. So the best way to categorize what kind of birds we don't eat are birds of prey. So no birds of prey. There are lists elsewhere of what we can eat. And so chicken we can very clearly eat. And there's a list of others that we can very clearly eat. But interestingly enough, Chabad, which is one particular group of Orthodox Jews, does not allow turkey because turkey isn't on any of the official lists, even though it's not a bird of prey. Most Jews eat turkey though. But the reigning idea is no birds of prey. Also, how about this last section about birds?
Any winged creature that is clean, you may eat. So any creature that isn't a bird of prey.
Well, not only that, but read the sentence before.
Flying insects are impure for you, do not eat them.
Flying insects. So here and elsewhere, in Leviticus, it'll broaden the category. No creepy crawlies. So not only flying insects, but spiders and cockroaches.
I've never wanted to eat a roach.
Oh, I'm so glad. Because
Or a
it's not
spider.
kosher. Good, not kosher.
Okay.
All right. So you're off the hook. And then do not eat anything you find already dead. So this section here would be what would be an example of something we might eat that we find already dead.
But it says you can give it to a foreigner residing in your town.
I will explain that.
Okay.
But yes, absolutely. Huh?
Sorry, I thought roadkill, but
Roadkill, right. We cannot eat roadkill. No roadkill. But what this has come to be interpreted as is that to eat an animal, we need to slaughter it in a very specific way. We can't slaughter it with undue harm. So we slaughter with a very specific knife.
So where is that in the Bible? Where does
So
it
there is,
talk about?
let's see. I'm just trying to think, there's an article here. Where does he talk about that verse? There's a verse that says that you must only kill an animal in the way that God commanded you to. I need to find that specific verse.
Okay.
I will find that specific verse, but but that has been interpreted over time as as this specific way of kosher slaughter. Also, there are so many laws in Torah about not causing undue harm to animals that the concept has evolved of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, which means not causing harm to animals. So the way that we slaughter has to have the least amount of harm that we possibly can. So that's part of it too, that wider idea of tsa'ar ba'alei chayim, of not causing undue harm to animals.
Okay.
We also, in addition to do not eat anything you find already dead, elsewhere in Tanakh, we learn do not eat anything that's ill. So everything we eat has to be healthy, right? So if we, even if we use the specific kosher ritual slaughter, if we find out that there's something that the animal wasn't healthy, that animal is not kosher. It doesn't mean that the animal is bad, right? So, you know, you are welcome to, if you keep kosher, you are welcome to eat that animal.
Foreigner could eat.
Right, but it's that distinctiveness, right? That distinctiveness of keeping kosher that it doesn't make the animal bad. It's just not something that a
Okay.
Jewish person eats. And then this last bit here, what is this? Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. What in the world does that mean?
I don't know.
Well, so literally, right? You don't slaughter a goat and then milk its mother and cook the baby goat in the mother's milk. But over time, it's developed to be, we don't eat milk and meat in the same, together in the same meal. Okay, that's a lot all at the same time. So let's review what we have so far. All right, in order to be potentially kosher, a mammal must have these two features.
Split hoof,
Split hoof.
chew cut.
Chew cud. Right, so let's, okay, for fish, what must be the two features?
Scale.
Fins and scales. And then what is the, how can you tell if a bird is potentially kosher?
It doesn't eat prey.
Yeah, bird, well, it's not considered a bird of prey because chickens eat worms and that can be considered prey, but
Oh,
you know, it's not a bird that eats like mice or
okay.
squirrels or chihuahuas. It's a thing in this neighborhood. We got hawks.
Really?
Yeah, they pick up
Do they
chihuahua.
really
They
have
pick up,
hawks?
yeah, they're beautiful.
Oh,
They you can't leave your little dogs outside.
yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. All right. So our list of animals now. We're going to review what out of our animals are kosher. Okay. So, all right. So cat. Is a
No.
cat kosher? No. Why is a cat not kosher?
Because they're too lovable. You
Aw.
don't want to eat a cat.
Cows are lovable.
Yes, some of them are.
So why else isn't a cat kosher?
It's a prey animal. Is that a reason?
No,
It doesn't have a split hoof.
doesn't have a split hooves or chew its cud. How about chicken? Is chicken kosher?
Mhm. It can be.
Yes. Because it's not a bird of prey, so, and it's on lots of lists that we didn't read. All right, a cow, is a cow kosher?
Yes.
Yes, why?
It has a split hoof and chews its cud.
Split hoof and chews cud. Bluebird?
I wouldn't eat a bluebird.
You wouldn't eat a bluebird. I wouldn't eat a bluebird, but that doesn't make it not kosher. Is a bluebird a bird of prey?
Well, it goes after worms.
Sure, but does it go after chihuahuas? That
Probably
might be,
not.
you know what, that's gonna be how I explain it from now on. An animal that goes after a chihuahua or bigger is not kosher. So a bluebird
Okay.
is kosher because a
Okay.
chihuahua is bigger than a bluebird.
Okay.
All right.
So a duck. A lot of people do eat duck.
Mm-hmm.
It would be kosher.
It would be kosher. A duck would not eat a chihuahua.
Okay. I
It's
love
bigger
that.
than a chihuahua, but it wouldn't
Yes,
eat a chihuahua.
Yes, you're
Right.
right.
All right. How about a dog?
No.
No hooves, doesn't chew its cud, too lovable. How about a giraffe? Tricky one.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
All right, does it have split hooves?
I think it does.
It does have split hooves. Does it chew its cud?
Maybe.
Yes, it does. But there's an issue with giraffe. What would be the issue with a giraffe? Knowing what we do.
Does it eat chihuahuas?
what do we, knowing what we do about kosher slaughter?
I don't know.
So in order to do kosher slaughter, it needs to be a single swipe with a very, very sharp knife.
Oh,
And a giraffe's neck is A, so far off the ground, and B, so big that it theoretically you could eat giraffe, but A, who wants to eat giraffe? And B, who wants to manufacture a knife that big? So they haven't figured out how to manufacture a knife that's that big and that gets rid of the blood quickly enough for the giraffe to not feel the pain.
okay.
So it is kosher technically, but it's never, I can't say it's never been done, but in kosher history, it's never known to be done.
Okay.
Okay, lion.
Well, now lion goes after prey.
Sure, but it's a mammal. So what are the rules with mammals?
No split hoof.
No split hooves. So because it doesn't have split hooves, it's not kosher. We've got a few more. Alligator. Because we can categorize an alligator either as a water animal or a land animal, right? But either way, if it's a land animal, is an alligator kosher?
I would say, I don't know.
So what are the
Chew
categories?
cud and hooves.
Does an alligator chew its cud?
I don't know a lot about alligators.
Does an alligator have hooves?
I don't think so.
No, an alligator does not have hooves. So it's not kosher if we categorize it as an land animal. Does an alligator have scales? If we categorize it as a water animal?
I don't think it does.
Kind of, sort of, but it certainly doesn't have fins. So no matter how you spin it, an alligator is not kosher. How about shrimp?
No.
No, because
No.
Share.
right, it's got, which means that it doesn't have scales. It has a shell instead. How about tuna? Yes. Fins and scales. And your salmon too. Fins and scales. What it rules out for water animals is shellfish in general, and swordfish, shark, that sort of thing. The trickiest one with water is catfish, because catfish are born with scales and then lose them. So it's a debate. So most people who keep kosher don't eat catfish, but you could argue that you could. All right, questions about these animals that we eat or that we don't eat? Joyce, you have a look on your face like this is absolutely ridiculous.
No, I'm thinking I'm not going to eat any more bacon. That's what I'm thinking. But I really don't eat a lot of meat. So
Mhm.
I do eat fish. I'm allergic to shrimp, so I don't eat
yeah.
shrimp. Mostly salmon and flounder,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And I will eat turkey and I do eat chicken, but I'm just not a big meat person. But I do eat bacon, but I probably won't after today.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I've always argued that and debated it, but Christians have a different take on it because they say we're under the new covenant,
Mhm.
But still,
Right. Out of all of the laws, the bacon is one that's explicitly stated.
exactly.
Right. It's not something that
Exactly.
we go through
Debate.
that we debate, like separating milk, meat, and dairy.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
But bacon is it specifically gives that example of what not to eat.
Is that meat and dairy, is that the same? Is that the reason a lot of Jews won't eat cheese on their hamburgers?
Yes, indeed. So let's continue with that. So with separating meat and dairy, what that means is, like you're saying, we won't eat cheese on a hamburger. I won't eat chicken parmesan. If I'm having a steak, which I never do, but if I'm having a steak, I can't drink a glass of milk with it. So we don't eat meat and dairy in the same meal. In fact, let's see. There are, when we eat meat and dairy, there are different categories of food. We categorize our meals. We say, I'm either eating a meat meal, which we might call fleischig is in the Yiddish, basari is in the Hebrew. So either mammal or poultry, that's going to be meat. That's going to be a meat meal. So milchig is in the Yiddish, chalavi is in the Hebrew. So that's food containing dairy ingredients. So dairy is anything that comes from any milk product, right? Whether it's cow milk or goat's milk or sheep's milk, any milk product. Pariv is food that's neither meat nor dairy, and that includes fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, eggs, fish. So remember, eggs and fish, even though they come from animals, they're considered pariv. They're considered that they don't have any meat or dairy in them.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
We were talking about milk
Mhm.
and, you know, especially my generation, the only kind of milk you could get was from a cow.
Mm-hmm.
But now you can get milk from a nut.
Mm-hmm.
So would you still say that you couldn't do almond milk with meat?
No, so almond milk is a great substitute for if you're trying to cook a meal and it calls for milk, you can substitute with almond milk. Or if it has chicken broth and if a meal has chicken broth and you want some sort of liquid that's dairy or that's pariv, you can use almond milk.
But could you do almond milk with meat?
Yes.
Yes.
You can do fake cheese. You know how they have Daya cheese? It's not worth it. I don't know why anybody uses fake cheese. You could put fake cheese on your burger. We often will have impossible meat, which is fake meat with cheese on top for dinner. So it's about the ingredients, not much about the intention. It's if it's a dead animal, then it's meat. If it comes from an animal, then it's and if it's milk that comes from an animal, then it's dairy.
Okay.
So then what it's talking about here is what we often do, what a lot of observant Jews will do is they will have a waiting period between when they eat meat and dairy. So dairy doesn't give as much of an aftertaste as meat does, right? If I eat some cheese and I drink some water afterwards, it's usually, kind of gone. And so there's not really a waiting period between dairy and meat. Some people will say a half hour, but others will say just drink a glass of water and then you can have meat. That doesn't tend to be the practice. The practice tends to be you don't have them both one after the other, but there should be some sort of symbolic separation between dairy and meat. But if I eat meat first, there are several traditional waiting periods. So some people will say 1 hour, some people will say 3 hours, some people will say 6 hours. So I do the intermediate. So I will wait
3 hours.
Right. So that means that after I have a burger or after I have a chicken sandwich, I'll wait 3 hours before I can have any dairy. Okay. With all of that said, let's go back to our breakfasts and lunch, our breakfast and dinners. All right.
I have a question.
Yes. Question?
Okay, about the animals that chew cud, are those vegetarian animals?
Yes.
Okay,
But not all vegetarian animals chew their cud. But other animals But other mammals might be deer, bison, buffalo. Those are all kosher.
So, I mean, because when I asked that, because when I read all this, I process in terms of trying to logically consider what makes these rules, like where's the sanctity in these rules, like on a logical level, I guess is what I try to look for. And
Yeah.
so it's the rule of basically that I can eat an animal that doesn't eat other animals.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Interesting.
is that the thing?
Well, so there are going to be a pig doesn't eat other animals, so that it's not a universal rule.
Okay.
And there are farmers who will feed meat to animals that are supposed to be vegetarian, and chickens too, even though chicken is kosher, they'll eat worms. So it doesn't, that is a nice way of looking at it, but it's not universal. Which is why for me, the biggest reason to keep kosher is the Jewish identity. For me, it doesn't really make much logical sense. These rules don't make much logical sense beyond, number one, God said so, and number two, it reminds me every bite that I take that I'm Jewish and make a choice about the food that I'm eating.
And when you say God said so, do you mean that God said so to Moses, who wrote, or to?
Mm-hmm. So God spoke to Moses, and Moses told people Israel what was in Torah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind that that is my perspective of what Torah is, and not everybody holds that perspective. So
Everything in the Torah were that you'd say the inspired words of God through Moses.
yes, passed down from generation to generation. I think that's a key as well.
I see.
Through human language passed down from generation to generation. But yes, I think that the commandment to eat certain animals or not eat certain animals is a law passed down from God to Moses at Mount Sinai. If you ask any Jewish person who keeps kosher why they keep kosher, everyone's going to give you a different answer.
Okay.
But those are my two answers. One is to remind myself that I'm Jewish all the time, and two is because God said so. So let's categorize our meals. Oh, meat, dairy, carb, and very important category that we cannot forget. Oops. Not okay. 6. Make it green. Okay. Sushi. So your sushi, your salmon avocado roll, your salmon avocado cucumber roll, what category is that going to be in, Sephora?
What does pariv mean again?
So pariv means not meat or dairy, but still kosher.
I guess it would be in the meat because it has salmon in it.
So interestingly enough, fish is not categorized as meat.
Okay.
Because you don't slaughter it the same way as you would slaughter meat.
So would the sushi be pareved in?
Exactly. So salmon sushi. What category would it be in if your sushi was eel?
I don't know what an eel is.
Talking about like the snake, it's a,
Yeah, sea snake.
yeah.
What category would that be in?
Not kosher.
Not kosher. No fins or scales.
That's okay with me.
Good. I'm glad. Me too.
Hey, I have to ask this now because
Yeah.
I haven't known this. So is eel sauce made of eel, or is eel sauce?
Not always.
Okay,
Not always.
but no, I didn't know.
I think that sometimes they make it with eel and sometimes it's just kind of kind of like with duck sauce. Duck sauce doesn't have duck in it. It's just what you put on duck. So I think
Okay.
eel sauce is similar.
Hmm.
I don't know for sure though. How about all of your veggies, your green beans, your potatoes?
They're kosher.
They're kosher. What
But,
category?
oh, okay. They would be part.
Carve. Nice. Veggies. Cooked veggies. Okay.
But
How-
my bacon would be non-kosher.
Yes, your bacon would be not kosher. So bacon and toast, even if you've got the toast in there, is not kosher.
Okay.
How about my fried rice with cheese?
Dairy.
Dairy. Rice plus cheese. So what might I do to this fried rice plus cheese to make it not kosher?
Add meat.
Add meat, any kind of meat,
Oh,
kosher meat. It would not be kosher. How about your chicken, eggs, and veggie bowl?
meat.
Meat, yeah, because assuming that there was no cheese in there, I'm gonna assume there was no cheese.
I think there was cheese.
Well, let's assume that there was no cheese in there.
And
Let's pretend. Then it's there's no dairy in it, and so it's chicken by itself. And also, let's assume that this is chicken that was slaughtered in a very specific kosher way, which it wasn't. But chicken, eggs, and veggies would be a meat meal. So we said your bacon and toast is not kosher. And then finally, what about my oatmeal with milk?
dairy.
Dairy, milk, fruit. But how might I have made my oatmeal pareve?
Take out the milk.
Take out the milk. What might I substitute the milk with?
Almond milk.
Almond milk. There you go.
Or coconut
Or
milk.
coconut milk or hemp milk, or what are all the other ones?
Yeah.
Oat milk.
Mhm.
There are a lot of different ones now. Questions about meat, dairy, parve, etc.
Well, I think I know how hard it is to find kosher chicken. Because working here, I've tried to do it for people for years, and you can't find it. So I guess the answer to that is, well, don't eat chicken.
Right. So when I go out to eat, I just eat vegetarian, or sometimes I'll have fish.
Okay.
But we order it in, so they'll ship it. There are companies that will ship it in dry ice. And
Okay.
sometimes people will drive to Dallas, congregants will drive out to Dallas and pick up kosher meat to bring
I
back.
was gonna ask, seems like I remember there was a kosher place in Dallas.
Atlanta also, Atlanta, Houston, New Orleans. So whenever people go in our community, whenever people go to big cities, they'll often come back with meat.
Okay.
But what I will say is that even people in the community who keep kosher, or who identify as keeping kosher, a lot of people will still eat meat out because, but they just won't eat meat and milk together, right? Even though it's not technically kosher meat, they do their best with what they have.
Okay.
But I don't eat meat when I go out. All right, so when I go out, I'll usually say I'm vegetarian, or I'm pescatarian. So I'm pescatarian but allergic to shellfish. Is usually the way that I'll explain it, just so that I know that the things weren't cooked in the same batter.
Mhm.
Okay. So why separate meat and dairy? Okay, our first one is God said so. So in Exodus, 2 verses in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. But then we have a couple more reasons why, right? Philo of Alexandria said, a person who boils the flesh of lambs or kids in their mother's milk shows himself cruel and brutal of character, without compassion. So according to Philo, why don't we eat kid in mother's milk?
It's cruel.
It's cruel, right? It's just the idea behind it, eating a kid and its mother together, or having the mother provide something to be cooking the kid in, right? It's cruel. For Maimonides, as for the prohibition on eating meat boiled in milk, it is, in my opinion, not improbable that idolatry had something to do with it. Perhaps such food was eaten at one of the pagan ceremonies. So according to Maimonides, what is his idea about why not meat and milk?
Yeah. Because it was probably related to sacrilegious or a pagan ceremony. Yeah.
It's another one of those like keeping us distinct. Right?
Yeah.
We don't do it because they do it.
Huh.
And then, and then for Professor Jacob Milgram, the common denominator in these prohibitions is the fusion and confusion of life and death. The mother's milk, the life-sustaining food, should never become associated with death. I think this is similar to Philo, but is there something different he's saying here?
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Any other reasons why to separate meat and dairy that you can think of?
Say it probably causes inflammation.
So back to that health thing.
Digestive issues.
Back to that health thing for sure. But I feel like for me, that's just dairy in general.
I'm not gonna lie, I have had a steak with like Alfredo pasta. I mean, it's good. I've eaten a lot of these things that is prohibited on these lists.
So interesting. So maybe what that is too is, reducing the, I'm not saying that your steak and Alfredo was gluttony, because I'm guessing you don't eat it every single day. But maybe reducing overindulgence, right? Enjoying the food we have, but maybe it's just too much overindulgence to have both meat and milk. They're both luxuries.
Well, I mean, all of these things, they describe a deeper, I want to say, mindfulness about what you're eating and what you're eating together, which it all makes sense to me on a spiritual level.
Yeah. It's taking a step back every time you open a menu and saying, I cannot get everything on this menu. I need to really read the ingredients and ask questions and figure out. And in that process, I'm not only taking the time to figure out is it kosher or not. By taking that time, I'm also internally asking myself, well, I'm giving myself the time to think, is this really something that I want to eat right now? Is this really something I need to eat right now for my own health and for what I need right now, emotionally as well?
So if you ordered a steak and you had steak and salad and a baked potato, and then they bring you cheesecake for dessert, could you eat the cheesecake?
Well, I wait 3 hours between when I eat meat and when I eat dairy.
Okay,
So
so
I could take the cheesecake home and eat it later.
Okay.
Or what a lot of kosher restaurants will do is they'll have fake cheesecake, which isn't very good, but they'll have fake cheesecake or fake ice cream for dessert.
Okay.
Or let's say, if you order steak and it has a pat of butter on top, that's not kosher either. Some people will drink a glass of milk with their steak, also not kosher.
That doesn't even sound good to me.
It doesn't to me either, but I will say I had a conversion student a couple of years ago who was just mortified that they were not able to have their glass of milk with their steak for dinner anymore.
Wow.
Right. So it's just awareness of personal practice.
I have another question. Okay, so you're going to make chicken soup. and you have a kosher chicken. And in my chicken soup, I add heavy cream, but I couldn't do that.
No, but what might you put instead?
Well, the almond milk would work because it doesn't have the texture of, but I'm sure there's something else you.
Well, I can think of an ingredient that is a good replacement for heavy cream.
Okay.
What else almond milk might not work, but what's another kind of replacement milk that can be heavy?
I don't know.
So coconut cream.
Coconut cream. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make note of that. So, okay.
And then you've also got my mother-in-law uses that fake creamer, Riches. It's called Riches, or Mocha Mix. She uses Mocha Mix a lot. I'm not a fan, but a lot of like the older generation who didn't have that ready access to coconut cream would use the non-dairy coffee creamer.
Okay.
Right. And so for recipes that call for butter, you can use oil or margarine, earth balance instead. So there are a lot of substitutes. So for me, when I'm making a pasta dish that calls for cheese and meat, I'll often saute mushrooms instead of the meat. Some people will put the fake meat in. I love fake meat, so I'll put in veggies instead.
Yeah, me too.
So lots of ways to do substitutions. And if you ever have questions about substitutions, happy to answer. I like getting creative with it. All right. One thing to keep in mind, if you've been in our kosher kitchen at Agudat Achim, you'll know that we have separate dishes. We cook on separate dishes for meat and for dairy meals. So when I'm eating a meal that has meat in it, I use one set of dishes. When I'm eating a meal that has dairy in it, I'll use another set of dishes. And if I'm eating a meal that has neither, I can use either set of dishes. Okay. So when I buy a new set of dishes from the store, it's neither meat nor dairy. They're parve dishes. Some people will go through the extra process of dipping them in a pool, dipping them in a mikveh and a ritual bath, just because there's an outdated notion of we can't use dishes that were used by somebody who's not Jewish because they may have used them for idol worship, which is ridiculous because they come from the factory. Nobody's doing idol worship in the factory. So really, when you buy a dish from the store, you can use it for either meat or dairy. When you use plastic silverware or when you use plasticware or paper plates, right, can be used for either. So if you're having somebody religious over for a meal, someone who keeps kosher over for a meal, one of the easiest ways to serve them is from plasticware, from paper ware. But if you want to make your dishes kosher, let's say that you decide to become fully kosher, strictly kosher, there are different ways that you make your dishes kosher. And we do this on Passover too. On Passover, we make kosher our dishes so that they don't have any trace of any of those grains. So for metal, so there's this for all of these, there is a tradition of the flavor comes out as the flavor comes in, the flavor being meat and dairy. So for metal bakeware, the heat that's used in metal bakeware is the oven, right? Is direct full-on heat. Right? So, and for metal bakeware and frying pans, things that you fry with, the method of heat is full-on heat, and so you can use either a blowtorch or really, really hot oven. to kosher things that are bakeware or frying pans. If it's something that you boil in, or if it's utensils, or a small things, and it's metal, then you stick it in boiling water. So if I want to kosher my my forks that might have been stabbed into a piece of hot ham, right? Then I can dip it in boiling water and it's considered kosher after I wash it, of course. I got to wash the utensils and then stick it in boiling water. So with metal, it's either blowtorch really, really hot oven or boiling water. If you've got a pot that's really, really, really big and you can't stick it in boiling water, you boil the water in the pot and you let it flow over. For ceramics, there's not really a way to kosher ceramic, so you can't really kosher plates. So ceramic is out of the question. Glass, you just wash it. So it has to do with the porousness of the different materials, and it has to do with whether the stuff gets embedded in it or not. So glass you wash, metal, blowtorch or boiling water or oven. Ceramic you can't kosher it. Questions about that? Okay. Just something something to know.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
a recipe. So I have a dish I make or have made called with salmon with like an Alfredo sauce and vegetables, like, so it would be fish mixed with cheese, basically. So tell me about that.
Sure. So what category is fish? Is it meat? Is it dairy? Is it
Parve.
right? And so that means that it can be mixed with Alfredo sauce.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, it's like I don't eat steak, but maybe once every couple of months or and I guess while we were reading that, I was trying to think of according to this, what's the worst thing that I've eaten that I can consider, and so I was like, well, that definitely, which, like you said, is very indulgent, not healthy. I know that, either.
But I want to argue though against the idea that keeping kosher makes you healthier. It might make you more mindful, but French fries are kosher. Donuts are kosher.
Right.
Depending on what oil they're cooked in, but on their own, French fries and donuts are kosher. You could eat French fries and donuts all day and be perfectly kosher.
Yeah.
And
Well,
fried.
yeah. Okay. I see. I guess I'm associating that not only is that not kosher, that like a steak with Alfredo, not healthy either. It's altogether indulgent and, yeah. But
And cheesecake.
yeah.
Have cheesecake all day. But not after you have your chicken.
Okay.
Right. Oh, I didn't bring them from the kitchen, but I challenge you for next time. We have the way that people who keep kosher identify whether a food has been prepared on kosher dishes, on dishes that are reserved for either meat or parve or dairy, is that companies will put a little kosher symbol on the packaging. So these are common kosher symbols. The OU is probably the most common, this one here. And these symbols are given out by companies, so that are run by different rabbis. And so there's a little bit of corruption that happens with each of these kosher companies. Another reason why, better to go fresh food than prepared food regardless. But the way that you know that it is kosher is that, or that an ingredient is kosher, is you look for one of these symbols. Right, I'm in this camp, right? Additionally, some observant Jews will eat other foods without a printed hechsher, but will carefully read labels to ensure the food contains no non-kosher ingredients. Some foods I will only buy with a hechsher. Some foods I will buy without a hechsher. It depends on whether it's cold or hot. It depends whether it has onions and garlic, but that's a whole different discussion. But if you're buying fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables, if you're buying fish, eggs, milk, juice, coffee, tea, sugar, flour, spices, any of those things that wouldn't be produced with any meat or dairy anyway, those are all, or with any extra meat or dairy anyway, those are all kosher without a hechsher. So the next time that you see a kosher symbol on aluminum foil, please know that that is a marketing gimmick and doesn't matter. You don't need a hechsher on your aluminum foil or dish soap, because you're not eating hopefully you're not eating your dish soap. There are more issues if you're eating your dish soap than whether it has a kosher symbol on it. Great. Other questions about kashrut in general, because we're going to end with something a little bit different, but not too different.
I just want to say that there's it's a store that was opened on Uri Drive called Jerusalem. It's but it's not like a Jewish, it's something else. Right?
It's a Muslim run.
Yeah. Okay.
It has halal meat. So Islam has similar kosher rules. So basically this kashrut is stricter than halal.
Okay.
But it comes from the same place. So a lot of Muslims will buy kosher meat because it's easier to find in some areas. They'll eat either halal or kosher meat. But it doesn't go vice versa, because halal is not as strict as kosher.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't buy halal meat, but someone who keeps halal might buy kosher meat. Similar rules, but kosher is more tends to be stricter.
Okay.
But they both come from the same place of trying not to do undue harm to animals.
Yeah.
We hoped that Jerusalem Market would provide kosher meat, but they didn't really understand what kosher meat was. So unfortunately, we didn't get to that agreement. But it's great to support them because it's a small family business and they are lovely people. And apparently their bread is great. I haven't tried it. All right. One other way. What's one other way? And it's in big letters, to be mindful about the food that we put into our system.
Without saying a blessing. Yeah, or to offer a blessing when you do eat.
Right, to offer a blessing when you eat. And so in Judaism, like with other prayer, we have set blessings for the different kinds of foods we eat, both before and after. The after blessings tend to be pretty long, so they're not. So we're not going to go over those. But remember that when we're giving blessings, yes, there is a prescribed formula, but it's not limited to that. So if there's more we want to say to God about the food that we're putting in our mouths, there's nothing keeping us from saying more. But these blessings are a good place to start from. So this is, what page is this?
I was going to say, here it is.
Or 165 for you. I'm using an older document. So just to go over the blessings that we do have. If we're eating a blessing out of on some sort of bread, we say this top blessing. And there's sort of a hierarchy of blessings, right? If we're eating a meal with bread in it, bread kind of trumps everything else. We only say that blessing over bread. But what we really do is we focus on what is the central part of our meal. What are we eating this meal for? And that's the thing that we say our blessing over, if it's not a meal that has bread in it. So for example, let's go back to our dinner. So if you had your dinner of sushi, salmon, avocado, cucumber, what do you think is the dominant ingredient in your sushi?
Probably the rice. I mean,
Rice.
yeah. Mhm.
Right. So rice comes from the ground. So you would say the blessing, thank you, God, who creates the fruit. Rice is that dominant ingredient who creates the fruit of the earth. With and that might be for your vegetable meal too. For my oatmeal, my dominant ingredient would be oats. That's grains. So I would say the grain blessing. For if I were eating an apple, I'd say the fruit that grows on trees blessing. And then if I were having a piece of chocolate, I'd say the miscellaneous food blessing. Or if I were just eating a hard-boiled egg. So these are just, again, even though they are parts of Jewish law because of the rabbis who we'll learn about next week, but while these are parts of Jewish law to say these blessings, these specific blessings, they're also just a jumping off point, just to make sure that we say something that we take a breath and that we say something before we eat. So what I'll often tell people is if they're looking for some way to incorporate that mindfulness in eating, some sort of Jewish mindfulness in eating, often I'll invite people to print out this sheet and just to keep it on their kitchen table. And so whatever snack you're eating or whatever meal you're eating, just to take a moment and say that blessing to give thanks before you dive in. All right. So that's all the content I have. Are there other questions that have come up?
I do have a question that
Sure. And I forgot that was a page too, so we can go over that too.
so this is not about eating, but I've been thinking about it based on something I went to I heard a service this past week, and it was talking about, like, in the beginning, it was talking about the story of Abel and Cain, and how they both brought a sacrifice to God, and Abel sacrificed an animal, and Cain brought a sacrifice, which was things he grew, from the earth. And I guess the sermon talked about that Abel's sacrifice was considered more, I guess, acceptable to God. I just wondered if you had a word to speak about that, the logic, or not logic, but yeah, what was what I heard was it was because Cain grew those things himself, and so it was the idea that he was saying, "Here, look what I did," like it was a place of ego, versus there was a humility in Abel's sacrifice of the animal. But I don't know. I just wanted to hear something you had to say about that.
So my take on that tends to be price, really, from a technical perspective. I mean, back in the day, they probably weren't, it wasn't about exchanging money, but it takes a little bit more effort to not only grow the vegetables, but also to raise an animal and to feed those vegetables to the animal. It takes a lot more time and a lot more effort, and animals tend to be more expensive. Meat tends to be more expensive than veggies. And so Abel was offering something that was more valuable.
Yeah, I guess so. It was human life. Oh, it's not a human life. It was life. Okay. That makes sense to me now. Thank you.
And something just to keep in mind about the story of Cain and Abel, in Hebrew, Abel is hevel, which means like wispiness or vanity. So not vanity like I like looking in the mirror, but vanity as in kind of nothingness. So it's the same word in Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanity, nothingness of nothingness. So the story of Cain and Abel isn't really about Abel, because his story literally means, or his name literally means wispiness or nothingness, or vanity, right? The story is really about, we really are learn from Cain in the story. I always find that fascinating. Let's see. Where was that? Here we go. So just that extra, thank you for opening to that page. I had forgotten about that page, but it's probably the most important page. So if nothing else, right, not everybody who learns about keeping kosher is going to want to keep kosher. But what is important, I think, is learning about that mindfulness in eating with regards to the life around us, right? Being mindful of the fact that when we eat animals or when we eat products, we are consuming life. And so just a couple of concepts, or one big concept that I mentioned before is Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, that prevention of unnecessarily causing pain to animals. We see that in a few different places. You shall not plow with an ox and a mule harnessed together, right? There's also, even if it's your neighbor's donkey, right? You can't leave the donkey overburdened. You have to help them unload the donkey, right? Those are both in Torah. And then in Talmud and later commentary, a person is forbidden to eat until they've fed their animals. There's no difference between the pain of human beings and the pain of other living things. That love and tenderness of a mother for her young exist across species. So in Judaism, we're not seeing ourselves as any more than the creatures around us. We're just our own unique species with our own unique relationship with God. And we acknowledge that for a lot of us, we have bodies that need meat to survive, that need animal products, or at least that crave animal products. And so we try to do so we try to do that eating with mindfulness, right? Knowing that we're taking this life. And just as an afterword, this idea of eco-kashrut in renewal Judaism, which is another movement of Judaism, they try to look at keeping kosher not so much with the laws that God put forth in the Torah, but they look at the intention behind it. They see that the intention of keeping kosher as being aware of what we're using in the world. And so it's this way of really thinking about not so much trying to look for the meat with the kosher symbol on it, but either not eating meat or looking for meat that was humanely raised. And I will send you, I didn't bring this today, but I'll send you, there are some resources. There are some resources where if you eat meat a little bit, there are some resources where you can find out more about where your meat is coming from. So what are some symbols to look at when you're buying a package of eggs or milk, to know that it's been under some sort of supervision, that the animals have room to roam, and so on and so forth. That the fish that you're eating is farmed or caught sustainably. So I'll bring that information next time, because I didn't bring it this time, or I'll send it out in an email. But beyond the specific Jewish laws, it doesn't end there. We're asked to go above and beyond. We're not asked just to stick to what's on the page. So last thoughts, questions, etc.
This has been my favorite session.
I'm so glad.
It's just something I've always been very interested in, and studied it somewhat. And
it seems like so much, and then when you really pass it out, then it becomes more digestible.
Mhm.
Well, and I appreciated this too, because there's a lot of things that I had heard and read before, but it's like I didn't get it, but it's like I'm getting it on a deeper level, like how it makes spiritual sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Good.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious for both of you, is there some aspect of this that you want to take home with you?
Well, I was serious about not eating bacon. I mean,
Right. And you've
don't-
said you don't need it, right?
right. I don't really like it, I just eat it to get some protein because I don't like to buy packaged meat,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really the only protein
Mm-hmm.
I need to go back to eggs and use that as protein, but yeah.
Great. And how about you, Sephora?
Yeah, I feel like, which I'm gonna review this some more and all, but it's gonna help. It'll just bring the information into more of my eating, because I'm a pretty mindful eater. But it's just more. It's kind of like you were talking about the last piece. I think about, well, and I've heard it described too, as like the energy of animals that are slaughtered in a situation where they experience pain or suffering. And well, then if you go to eat that food, you're eating like a vibration or an energy that's in that food from the fear that animal experienced. And that, so I mean, it's like I've been sensitive to those things, and so this is just like a whole other layer to that. Because that's why I went vegetarian for a while, as I heard, I read some books, and I heard a special that kind of illuminated like the treatment of animals in a lot of different places. And I was just like, I can't eat meat for a while,
And I was vegetarian for I think 13 years, and then realized that I needed a little bit of meat in my diet. But I still try to find ways to buy in a way that's ethical. So, for example, when I'm looking for eggs, when I'm buying eggs, I always look for certified humane. This symbol is going to be, when you're buying eggs at the store, there are going to be lots and lots of options. Always important to look for not just this certified humane logo, because that's a specific organization, but pasture raised is always going to be better treated than if it says cage free. Pasture raised really means that the chickens get to roam outside. If you're looking for buying things, not necessarily food, but let's say bath products or things like that, you might look for the Leaping Bunny logo that you see on some of your bath products to see that it wasn't tested on animals. If you're trying to figure out, is this fish that I'm eating, is it both humanely raised, and is it fished in a way that's keeping that's sustainable for that particular area? This is a great website to visit. And they've got an app, so you can quickly search. For the food that you're eating. Grow and Behold and Whole Foods both have humanely raised kosher meat. Rescue Chocolate, Susan Gross, her daughter.
Oh, is that hers?
Yeah, her daughter does Rescue Chocolate, which is fair trade certified. I think fair trade certified, or at least they are mindful of where they get their chocolate, and it benefits rescue dogs. And Jewish Veg is a little bit of information about how Judaism and vegetarianism go hand in hand. So I can send these out next week, but I'm curious to hear what your humane buying practices are too.
Humane.
I've had a tendency to buy cage-free eggs, but I never heard what you said about pasture-raised versus cage-free.
So pasture raised means that the chickens are allowed to roam outside. Cage free means that it's not clear if they're allowed to roam outside or not, but they have space to roam around inside of a warehouse.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Mhm.
I used to be I was a militant vegan for 2 years, but I've been vegetarian for longer. So I've got a few of those resources. Thank you for learning with me today. I will see you next week.
You.
All right.